One of my favorite, it might even be my favorite quote, which is an old Chinese proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today, is to do it now. And that reminds me that it's never too late to do something. Anything that inspires you that maybe you didn't do over the years, if you wanted to start art or musical instrument, even simple things like reaching out to an old friend where maybe a lot of time has gone by and you think, I just think it's probably too late to reach out, or someone was going through a hard time and you just, you kind of beat yourself up that you didn't make contact. But it's never too late. It's never too late for anything. So remember, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now.
When I read the project description for leadership styles, I felt perplexed because many of my jobs in the past have been customer service level jobs where you get instruction from the top and you're just supposed to do what you're told and stay within the boundaries of your job description. After I thought about it some more, I started to wonder what makes a good leader and also what kind of leader am I? So leadership was an undeveloped skill for me. It was an unknown quantity for me until I started applying for teaching jobs. And specifically in the fall and spring of 2018, I started working as a freelance art teacher at local art shops and also at Buckingham's Choice in Adamstown, Maryland, which is a retirement community. And in the fall of 2018, I got accepted as an adjunct faculty art teacher at Frederick Community College in the non-credit division, And then in the winter of 2019, I started teaching classes there. When I began teaching classes, I had to learn how to lead a course and also how to overcome my overwhelming fear of public speaking. And teaching was a really big learning curve for me because it had been a very long time since I had been a beginner artist, and these classes are only 5 weeks in length, so they have to be very short and concise. But I also wanted to go over what I consider to be the most fundamental aspects of art, and in this case it was drawing. And I asked my mother-in-law for some feedback on my drawing syllabus, which was helpful. And I also got some really good advice from her about teaching below the level that I thought the students could handle, which was very helpful because many of the students had no art experience whatsoever. And I also learned how to communicate effectively with my students through syllabi and course objectives to help them understand the expectations that I had for them as students. So learning to communicate in an organized manner was also another important aspect of teaching. And in addition to learning these things, I also watched expert teachers who taught art and cooking lessons on YouTube, such as the well-known names Julia Child and Bob Ross, to see what a live demonstration should look like. And I also needed to do some more research specifically about leadership styles to learn more about what type of leader I am. I researched different leadership styles, and I also took the self-assessment on Toastmasters International website, and I just discovered that my preferred leadership style is called coaching. And coaching is characterized by encouragement, skill building, and a positive attitude. So for example, when I'm teaching my students, I use constructive feedback, and I'll try to look for the positive things that I see working in their artwork and be very specific and tell them things like your color looks good or your composition is really nice. So that's the encouragement component of teaching. And also, with regard to the skill building component, I will suggest a gentle critique as far as things they could improve on to make their work even better. And again, I'll be very specific and say something like, you need some more lights and darks in that still life. And one other aspect that I try to emphasize in my coaching is having a positive attitude. On the first day of class, I'll get a lot of students who are saying things like, oh, I can't draw and I have no talent and things like that. So in response to that, I will challenge that cognitive misperception that people have about their abilities. And I'll say, you know, drawing or painting is just like any other skill. It's like soccer or cooking. You just need to practice it more. And the more you practice, the better you're going to get at that skill. So it's really not about talent. So I try to emphasize the positive and just remind people to be gentle with themselves and just allow yourself to learn. And I want to submit some final thoughts about what I consider to be some effective attributes of a leader. So the first attribute I would like to state would be the capacity to be humble. I believe a leader also needs to be able to take feedback from others, and also to be an ongoing learner. And lastly, to observe problems and come up with effective solutions to those problems. So in my teaching, I get feedback from students in the form of course evaluations, and I do read those and I make adjustments based on what I read. For example, some of the students have difficulty with their sight, so I have modified my teaching methods to use a projector when I do art demonstrations, since I'm working with a senior population. And another, so that's part of the humble aspect of being a good leader, being able to change your way of doing things. So secondly, I try to make the lessons easy and relate to that beginner level. When I go to plan a lesson, I'll often ask for feedback from other teachers or maybe another artist just to see if that lesson is appropriate for somebody that's a beginner artist. So that would be the taking feedback aspect. And another issue that I think is really important is to always be learning and expanding your skill set. So one of the things I think is important is constantly be asking others for help when I encounter issues with either a teaching skill or a technology issue. For instance, during the pandemic with the COVID-19, I had to cancel one of my classes midway through, and I have adapted to that situation by teaching the course online via YouTube videos. And I needed to get some help, so I asked my husband how to create and edit YouTube videos for this art tutorial. And after I got his help, I was able to continue the class for 3 weeks and bring it to a conclusion so students could get that full benefit of the 5 weeks that they would otherwise not have had if I hadn't made that adjustment. And finally, I want to present the problem-solving aspect of a good leader, and that would be that they find workable solutions to problems that they see. And one of the main problems that I see with beginner artists and students is that they really struggle with drawing. In response to that difficulty, I have created a new course which focuses on 5 different drawing techniques, and it's written by Betty Edwards, and it's called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. So this new course will help students to develop their unique learning style as artists and find a method that would work best for them. So that would be an example of problem solving. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, good evening, fellow Toastmasters and guests. I have been finding myself in an unexpected stage of life lately. I'm not talking about the changes due to COVID-19. I'm talking about an unexpected parenting stage, which is kind of odd considering I'm a compulsive planner, but not so odd considering this unexpected stage I find myself in has to do with my 22-year-old daughter, Alex. Alex joined the Coast Guard last summer and is now living in Long Island, New York. That in itself is not the issue. I was prepared for this. I intentionally raised my kids to move out eventually, to be positive, productive members of society. Alex is stubborn, self-confident, and likes to do things her own way. For the first 10 years, we butted heads constantly. There was no punishment I could come up with that would make that girl behave. But with age comes maturity and more of that communication style that I really instilled in my kids. So by age 14, we became really good friends. We did all the girly stuff together, did the shopping and the chick flicks, went to the restaurants and took trips that the guys didn't want to do. So I felt very successful in my parenting. I had cultivated a warm, loving, friendly relationship with my children that was going to last no matter how far they roamed. I had been working on this for 20 plus years. We were going to talk and video chat, and we were going to be involved in each other's lives just as much as they were when they lived at home. Alex has been on her own for about 7 months now, since September when she graduated basic training. And I can tell you without a doubt, this is not the case. Sure, for the first 3 months or so, we talked and video chatted all the time. She had lots of questions on cooking and food shopping and what to do with her apartment. We couldn't wait to actually hug each other on Thanksgiving. And I was to go up to her place for the whole weekend. We were going to spend the whole weekend together. We bought Christmas decorations, decorated her new apartment, had the best time. But as my ever self-confident and extroverted daughter began to make new friends and get more involved in her new life, her interest at home, in me and at home, wavered a bit. The calls and the video chats, they slowed. What happened to my best friend? Girlfriend and mom had just become mom again. Sure, she calls on occasion. She has more questions, needs help with something. She doesn't ask about me. She doesn't ask about home. She pretty much dominates the conversation, does all the talking. And then there's this thing where she leaves the line open, whether it's on talking or video chatting, and she goes off and does other things. And we'll have the occasional conversation, or she'll make the occasional comment, but it's like she's hanging with, like we're hanging out on the phone. I don't get this. Maybe I'm too old for it, but I just find it really rude and wondering, I did not raise this rude person. But all parents need to remember that we were their age once. And I may not remember all the details of when I first moved out of my parents' house, but I'm pretty sure I acted the same self-absorbed way Alex is acting right now. And I'm sure that my mom felt just as left out as I'm feeling right now. And if she were still alive, she would definitely tell me that. So I have to remember and hope that all those years of working on this close, loving, communicative, friendly relationship will all come flooding back when the newness of her current life situation wears off. I can hope, can't I? Thank you.
Let me put myself on gallery view. Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Table topic section is where we give opportunity to members to practice on impromptu speeches. Different clubs follow different techniques in this section. I have seen that in the recent times, our club has been following a technique where we ask for volunteers to come forward and speak. I kind of favor a different technique where I get to pick the people. So I usually pick the people who are not on the agenda. So I see only two people who are not on the agenda today. One is Joe and the other one is Eric, our guest. Did I miss anyone else? Okay, so Eric, I have 3 topics today and I want to have you go last. Before you, so you get the feel of it, I want to have 2 experienced members who have been doing this for a long time to go first. So we'll get a sense of it. So I'm going to pick 2 people before you. The first one is going to be none other than our great Joe Hoffman. The theme for today's topic is around the current pandemic situation. I want to keep it on a lighter note. So, Joe, I'm going to give you an imaginary situation. Assume you are in a situation. Tell us how would you respond to that. And here is the situation. You are at the giant grocery store. Surprisingly, there's a long line at the register. You want to get out as soon as possible. You are very self-conscious and protective. You are wearing a N95 mask. And there's a long line. Everyone is wearing masks, except a gentleman behind you. He's not wearing a mask. He touches your shoulders. You turn around and he asks you, how are you doing? And then he coughs at you. Ho, ho. How would you react? Joe Hoffman.
First, can everyone hear me, or I guess I'm paused? Okay. First thing I would do, if someone touched me with a long line in front of me in giant, I would probably be shocked that he was so close because I didn't hear him come up behind me. But what I'd probably do, because I'd be frustrated, I'd drop all the stuff or the cart that I was having right in front of him, let it sit there. I'd walk out of the store. I think that would probably be the approach I would take at this point. Anybody that inconsiderate, if the first thing I would be in the store, because my wife does most of the shopping. She's got this routine down where probably the two of us tag team each other. I wait in the car and I have everything waiting for her to put it in the trunk. But I probably wouldn't be in that situation in the first place. And the other thing I would do is probably shop early. So I'd get there when the least amount of time really allows seniors to come in. The other thing we're doing a lot of to avoid that situation in the first place is we're doing a lot of online shopping. But I found that we have to be very specific when you order online versus ordering 1 dozen and be very precise. 1 dozen, that's 12 eggs or 12 bananas, or one bunch of bananas with at least six bananas. So that's the only thing with shopping online versus being in the store with maybe some rude person behind you tapping you on the shoulder, not within the 3 or 6 feet that they're supposed to be, and coughing on you besides. So that's the way I'd probably handle it if I was faced with that situation. Thank you.
Table topics is all about thinking on the feet. When you're asked a question and when you just do not feel like being able to speak for the entire 2 minutes, you can make up something. You can just twist the question and give some own experience. You don't even have to exactly answer the question. You can just kind of tweak it a little bit. Now let's see how Beth would tackle a similar situation, not the same situation. Beth, guess what? You're run out of toilet paper. And you're running to Costco. You're running to the aisle. And you see that there is only one. There's only 1 box of toilet paper. You run first to that place and grab it. Alas, somebody snatches it away from your hands. What would you do, Beth? Make it humorous.
Well, I'm running low on TP, toilet paper, and I've got to buy more because that's one of those supplies you just really can't do without. Unless you buy a bidet, which my niece did. But if you're running low, you probably can't order and install a bidet fast enough. So I'm in Costco to buy it, and this very rude customer wearing the mask from 6 feet away lunges for the toilet paper and grabs it out of my hands and goes back to being at least 6 feet away. And I am faced with a decision. Life is about how you react. It's not about what happens to you or what life does to you. It's what you do with what happens, right? So I have a choice to make. Now, I can get pretty angry pretty quickly if I think that my rights are being infringed upon. And let me tell you, having toilet paper ripped out of my hands at Costco, that's an infringement of rights. So I'd probably immediately consider or want to react without even considering the rights infringement reaction. What is wrong with you? I had it first, give it back, let me find an employee. I tend to be a little bit controversy. Don't like facing, having to, I can't remember the word, but anti-controversy. So I might actually get really angry with a store employee and ask the store employee to intervene. However, I would like to think that my cooler head would prevail, and because that's healthier and might need less toilet paper too. Well, that was bad. And I would, shrug this off and say that person might need it more than me. And I'm just going to have to find an alternative, and maybe I'll just go look up how fast we could get a bidet ordered and installed.
Thank you, Beth. It's really a very awkward question and awkward situation. Beth answered it really well. I saw a video in the recent times. Two or three ladies fighting for a toilet paper.
137.
Anyway, Eric, now is your turn. I'm gonna make it easy for you. So, here we are in this pandemic situation. And for 2 weeks, you are given an option. You are allowed to stay by yourself in one of the 4 houses. One house of Netflix. There's all food in it, but it's full of Netflix movies and shows. You can watch anything you want, your favorite shows, your favorite movies, documentaries, anything you want. That's the first house. Second house of gym. That house is full of gym exercise equipments. You can do anything you want. Besides, there's also food. In each house has a food. And the third house of books. Any genre, fiction, non-fiction, literature, any type of books you could imagine. There's an endless supply of books. The fourth, house of nature. There's a nice lake behind the house. And there's a trail. There's a park type of area. There's a bench you can spend time on. Which house would you choose to live in for a period of 2 weeks, and why? Eric Davis.
Good question. Are they all right next to each other? Would be my first thought. I'd start off with saying the Netflix house would probably be my last choice. I'm not a big movie person. And when you said the food house, I originally thought that would be my first choice. But then the last choice was the nature house, and that sounded quite interesting because I like to be outdoors. I like to smell the fresh air. I like peaceful scenery and views, and just to relax and do that kind of stuff. So I think my first choice would probably be the nature house, where I could just relax and just be myself. And that's my answer on that one. I'm hoping the nature house would be next to the food house, though, because I do love food. I love to cook. And that was a tough choice there, choosing between those 2 houses. But the Netflix and books house, sorry to say, they would probably be my last choice. So, there you go. I don't, not a good impromptu person here, but
No, good.
that was my 2 cents there.
Thank you, Eric.
Very good.
Did someone say something?
Do you have one more? We'll probably have one more to go. We could probably do one more.
Okay. Let's see.
This is impromptu for you.
Impromptu for me, all right.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm good. Do I get to pick somebody? Okay. Let's see. Is Larry doing anything today?
Larry's here.
No, is he doing anything on the agenda?
Yes, but that's okay. Pick Larry.
Okay, let's pick Larry then. Larry, guess what? You are the President of the United States of America. You get to pick what we do in this current pandemic situation. Do you remove the social distancing, or do you still enforce it? When would you enforce the policy or remove it? What would be your action? Joe Hoffman, Larry Ricks, the President of the United States of America.
Well, I think that I would consider the fact that as president, I don't have total unlimited authority. I'm not a king. And so I would want to consult with the individual governors and look at each situation, because let's face it, North Dakota is not going to react the same way as California or New York. And so I want them to assess the individual situation, realistically assess it, And that goes both ways. Realistically, in the sense that I don't want anybody placed at risk, but realistically to the point where I don't want the entire economy destroyed by being overprotective. Or for now, I'm not going to mention any specific governors, but I'm not going to say that it's okay to buy a 2x4, but you can't buy seeds or something like that. I might want to intervene there, but I would be very careful, because I do believe that the federal government has to be careful as far as stepping on individual state sovereignty. So yeah, I would definitely want to consult with the governors and with my advisors also to give them the best advice, but give them the leeway to govern their own states with some guidance from me and from my task force. Okay, Jodie, I think you had a very tough situation doing a virtual speech, sitting instead of being able to move around the stage and use the floor. So kudos to you there. It was interesting, well, a couple of things that I want to observe. Number one, tonight's speech, virtual though it was, you come a long way from your original speeches. You seemed very confident, very informed. Your presentation was very logical. A couple of things I want to bring up about your presentation. In the beginning, I noticed your eyes go up to the side a couple of times, which means you're gathering information. You're pulling down from your brain, that's a little bit of it would be less of an issue, I think, if you were standing in front of a room, but when it's just you on the screen, it's very noticeable. And the interesting thing is that after your first couple of minutes, you didn't do it anymore. Because I think what happened is you kind of got in a groove there. You got into your speech, you got into your information, and you began to present very logically. Some things that you didn't catch in the screen is you talked about a 5-week program, and then you held your hand up, will be more like that, with 4 fingers. Interestingly enough, the second time you made a point of 5, you did the full hand. So that would be something to think about. If you're going to use your fingers for numbers, make sure they're all on screen. The presentation, again, I thought was very good once you got on a roll. You came across as very confident. The thing that I think you pulled off very well that's difficult in a virtual presentation is you started to be animated. Now, because of the pictures, the way my iPad is showing things, I couldn't see much of your hands, but I could see you're moving, good facial expressions. So there was some movement there. You weren't just quote unquote talking head. So I think you did an excellent job there. So overall, I would say good presentation, good organization. Think about the fact that when you're doing a virtual presentation, because we talked about that in the very beginning, of the idea that, okay, from time to time we may have to do these, or we're doing Zoom meetings. I know we're doing a bunch of them. And that is a totally different scenario of when you're physically doing something. So overall, once again, great presentation, great animation once you got on a roll, because you really got into your subject. It was clearly the emotional attachment that you had to what you were doing when you were talking about your own experience. So again, overall, good job. Just be cognizant of the fact that you are on screen, so things are going to be a little different.
All right. Leann, thank you for sharing your story tonight. It really was provided insight into a vulnerability. And I think that's the main key with using stories and speeches or telling stories, is to connect with people, because you become vulnerable when you tell a personal story. So Leann was giving an speech or doing a project from Motivational Strategies Level 3 elective called Connect with Storytelling. So that elective is available on various paths. So connect with storytelling. And the objective was to either tell a story or give a speech that has a story contained within it. And the story could be a fairy tale, it could be fact or fiction, it could be personal or not personal. So she could pick any story she wanted. And Leann chose to tell us a personal story. And I think those can be very powerful because often they show vulnerabilities. And in this case, that was definitely the case. And as a parent, I could relate to Leann's frustration. And as someone with parents, I think probably all of us could relate with, you know, the experience of what happens when you go out on your own for the first time and how your relationship with your parents changes. And the fact that it does evolve and eventually gets better again too. So, so it was a good story to choose to tell. I liked how you led in with the hook. I have reached a life stage that was unexpected. And furthermore, you said not only is this life stage unexpected, but you're a planner. So, you know, this is really big to have a life stage that you weren't planning for. So that was a great way to lead in to grab our interest. And adding that this is not a COVID-19 stage that you're talking about was really good, because we could all just, in fact, I know that I did immediately assume, oh, she's talking about the COVID-19 thing. And if you think that you know what the person's about to say, you might pay less attention. And so you nipped that in the bud right away. You said, and this is not COVID-19. And we're like, oh, okay. So it's new life stage, unexpected, even though you try to plan for everything. And it's not even COVID-19. You've got my attention. So that was very, very effective. So it was a good story. And the areas where I think you could strengthen it a little bit are making an actual story within the speech that is about a specific conversation. So you gave us some generalizations about these days, you know, she's so self-absorbed, she just talks about herself, she doesn't ask me anything. So it was a lot of third party, you know, or second party. It was you saying how these calls go. And to make it even more effective, you might try telling about one such conversation. And it could be a made-up conversation that's sort of an aggregate of multiple different actual conversations. It doesn't have to be exactly as one specific conversation went, but you could say, for instance, last week, last night, yesterday, whatever, this morning, we were on the phone and she starts talking about, and then be specific, because the more specifics you give, the more compelling it is and more interesting it is. So the generalizations you made were good and they were effective and interesting, but it would be even more effective and interesting if you said, for instance, you know, I called her and right away she started saying whatever. Another area that you could, to challenge yourself, you could take that one step further and actually do some play acting. And you could act out. And you could, that would allow you to do some facial expressions of, you know, maybe her excitement and then your frustration as she's speaking. And you could even play act starting to say something and her interrupting you. And of course, it's one of these, you know, Alex, you know, I wanted to let you know, Mom, I got to tell you about blah, blah, blah. And so you could actually do that, you know, left and right, play acting each part and give us some more specifics. So to challenge yourself, you could try to work in some play acting. And then finally, at the end, I loved the end of your speech. A general rule of thumb is don't end speeches with thank you. You don't have to thank us for listening or for our attention. You can just end. And in this particular case, it's even that much more important because you had a great, very strong ending. Well, I can hope, can I? You just stop and pause. People understand that's the end. And it's really an effective way to end the speech. So nice job tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone have a fabulous and very safe weekend. And I'll see you on the 7th.
Bye.
Wonderful to see you guys. Bye.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye.